We talk about psychological strength as how, your mind can be your most valuable asset or your biggest barrier. This is it. This right here, right? Your unhelpful committee members that show up uninvited, if left to its own devices, this is what your mind will do. It will be a big barrier for you. You're going to have loud, unhelpful voices in your ear saying, you're going to fail. Say yes to that thing you know you don't want to do. Here's how you can fit it in. You stop taking care of yourself and devote the time there. Yes, you can. Oh, let's worry about this. Let's time travel and try to predict the future and judge other people. They will be chattering in your ear, causing unnecessary suffering and being one of the biggest barriers that you have to making progress and achieving the life experience that you want to have. And you get to pick this more positive, helpful, stronger side of things. The psychologically strong thing to do is to pause and intentionally call these helpful committee members to the table. And that's what we mean by psych strength.
You're listening to episode 188 of the Building Psychological Strength podcast, where we uncover the information, tools, and techniques to turn our mind into our most valuable asset.
The courage to face fears with persistence.
Being able to be present enough in this moment to choose my response thoughtfully.
We have the strength to bend to life stressors, to bend to adversity without snapping, without breaking.
There are only 6 things that contribute to our quality of life, and they are all experiences.
In every moment, we are deciding who we want to be and how we want to live our lives.
Noticing what your brain is doing and then being able to make choices.
Mobilize the things that we know lift us up.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Building Psychological Strength podcast. My name is April and I'm your host. This week, we are continuing with part 2 of our 2-part series on the committee in your mind. I say that because if you have not heard last week's episode, I highly suggest that you go back and catch that episode. With that episode and this episode, we are going through some common thought patterns, say, that many of us hear in our minds in the form of that constant mental chatter in our minds. And these are common voices that we hear or thought patterns because they're things like the inner critic. They are things like the Debbie Downer. They are voices that crop up especially when we are thinking about doing something new or potentially stepping out of our comfort zone. I mean, they come up all the time, regardless, but especially at those times when we're in an inflection point where we want to make a decision that will move us in a new direction. This is something that we go through in our Ascend program in much more detail, but I wanted to just give a plug in this intro for last week's episode so that you can make sure that you get the full story with that episode and this one, so you get the full picture of all of these committee members, as we call them. So the committee in your mind. Also, last week, Friday, I dropped a very, very quick special bonus episode to let you know about a new freebie that we have at Peak Mind. We started getting notes from people and we started hearing from people in our audience that as the school year was cropping up and beginning for some people, and as decisions were being made about what the school year would look like, people were starting to feel really nervous and worried, and perfectionism was kicking in, and they were wondering whether they'd be able to still perform well enough at work and help kids in a hybrid or learn from home model, all of this. And people were really starting to get nervous about that. Because of that, we put together a free resource for you. If you go to peakmindpsychology.com/support, you can get access to this free resource. These are 3 modules that you can use in the moment when you're feeling stressed, when you're feeling overwhelmed, when perfectionism's getting the best of you and that inner critic is kicking in. which we talked about in the last episode of the podcast, when all of those things are happening, we wanted to give you, think about it as like a 3 to 6 minute intervention that you can use in that moment to restore calm, to restore balance, and to put you back in the state of mind where you can move forward with intention and be more effective. Again, go to peakmindpsychology.com/support. When you enter your name and email address, you get immediate access to all 3 of these in-the-moment techniques that are evidence-based, proven to provide a meaningful shift in a very short amount of time. So I wanted to reiterate that that is out there and available for you. We've gotten a ton of people who have taken us up on it. We're getting a ton of great feedback back. So I want to make sure all of you know that that free resource is out there. So once again, I'm excited to welcome Ashley back for this episode of the podcast where we dive into the second half of this discussion about the committee in our mind. Last time we talked about these negative committee members that show up unannounced and they bust into our lives and give their opinions and their judgments about everything that's happening. Today, we're going to talk about some quieter committee members. So ones that need more of a formal invitation to show up, but ones that are way more helpful. Ones that will help you move forward with much more courage and much more alignment. We want to make sure we give you the rest of the story because there are some amazingly powerful voices that are hidden under the surface that you have to invite to the table. All right, let's dive in.
All right. So Ashley, last week, we talked about the literal laundry list of committee members in our mind who are not helpful.
Right.
Who show up unannounced. They chatter constantly. They have opinions about everything. And really, they just form this constant onslaught of noise that runs in the background of us, trying to just live our lives and, move in the direction that we want to go in. But you've got all these people that are chattering at you, trying to get you to go in a direction that maybe isn't as helpful.
Right. They're all showing up uninvited, influencing your emotions, pulling for those unhelpful ones or some icky ones, and then ultimately trying to dictate our actions. They're all vying for that output channel of our behavior. And it's problematic when it's these unhelpful voices. So I'm excited today to talk about the flip side of that and the really helpful committee members that we want to have show up and that we want to have casting votes and when it comes to our decisions and determining our actions and choices. So let's talk about those.
Absolutely. Because the thing is, we've talked about it a lot. This gets at one of those core points that, we try to make around you are not your thoughts. Those committee members that we talked about in last week's episode. So if you missed it, please go back and listen to that. The committee members we talked about there, they're not you.
No.
They're your mind just generating thoughts from below the surface of the water. These are associations and weird garbage that you pick up throughout your life. Society sort of spouting back things to you that you just implicitly learned. These aren't authentic, however familiar they feel. They aren't anything that you need to listen to, but rather today, the committee members we're going to talk about, these are legit more aligned and authentic to you. But the unfortunate thing, as you mentioned, they don't just happen. They don't just come to the table. They tend to require more practice, more of an invitation, more of an intentional sort of calling on them instead of them just blurting it out. If you imagine, we're around that table that we talked about last time, you have to call them out in order to get them to speak, but they're there. They're under the surface. We just don't look for them very often. So I agree. I'm super pumped to dive in.
Yeah, they're just not our natural default, right? With our mind's default toward negativity, those committee members that show up more easily, more readily, more quickly, usually fall in that category. It makes me think of, a classroom as I've got back to school on the brain. You've got a classroom full of students and the teacher says, what's 7 plus? And the kid blurts out 14. And the teacher was going to say 7 plus 3, right? So the kid's wrong. So where I'm going with this is just because your mind spits something out at you and it's the first thought, doesn't mean it's the right one. Doesn't mean
And just because it feels familiar, like you're so used to hearing that voice, does not mean it's authentic.
No.
That word gets used so often. And I'm like, but be careful. It just might mean familiar. It might not mean true to you.
Nope. It might mean habitual.
Yep.
So let's talk the committee members. Should we start with the coach?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's go there. I love it.
So I love thinking about the coach as one of the most important committee members that you got to invite. We have to cultivate. We have to practice being a good coach for ourselves. So when I think about the coach is the voice that plays to your strengths. And you know what? Even just think about this. If you have any experience with sports, even if you never actually played, just think about the difference between a bad coach and a good coach, right? Like bad coaches are the ones that tear you down, that criticize, that threaten, that bully, trying to get you to do well. And they might sometimes, but ultimately they have a really crummy effect, right? I don't know how many people I've talked to have quit sports because of a bad coaching. You can't quit your mind, right? So we need the good coach. Good coaches play to your strengths. They coax the best out of you. They're the ones who say, you know what, you've got this. But they're not all fluffy, right? They'll shoot straight with you too. You need to do this. You need to try harder. So they're not just going to coddle you and let you off the hook, but they're going to push you to be your best, to be strong, to be brave, to really play to your strengths. And we all need that voice in our head. Because think about it. When you have to do something that is difficult or scary, who's showing up? Is it the good coach that's like, girl, this is hard, but you got this? Or is it the bad coach that's like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with you? You're going to blow it. You better not. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I love the alignment that you made between a coach who's going to play to your strengths, because think about, again, sticking with sports, who's going to be more effective in getting a team to win? If you just took people and randomly think basketball, you randomly put them in positions, somebody who can't shoot should not be that like shooting point person. I don't know what the position is called.
I was just thinking, how is she going to finish that sentence? I don't even know the position.
You're like, I'm pretty sure she doesn't know. This is going to be funny. Or if you're really tall, you should probably be the person who's like blocking or whatever tall people do. But like playing to your strengths, you're not going to win very often if you're putting people in positions where they're not naturally good and naturally strong. And so I would encourage you, if you've never done this, there are a number of inventories out there that you can take, because number one, in almost anything that we do in Peak Mind or any other personal development stuff, PS, this isn't rocket science. It's always self-awareness. You need to know what you're working with first.
Right.
So go out there and take a good, valid strengths test. There's one called the VIA, that we really love. It was developed in the positive psychology realm. You can Google that. You can find free versions of that online. 16 Personalities is another free online one that'll give you some strengths as associated with it. And then also, if you've ever taken Gallup's Strengths Finder, that's another book. You have to pay for that one. PS, don't pay for just the online one. Go buy the book and you get a code that's a lot cheaper if you buy the book. I don't know why, but that's just how it goes. Buy the book and then you get a code along with it. That's another one that you can take. But figure out what those top maybe 2 or 3 things are that you're dealing with, because then when you're in a position, because here's how it plays out, right? Exactly how you were saying. You're in a position where things are scary or they're uncertain or they're new or they're changing, all the things that we hate as people. We just hate all of that. All the things that COVID is and continues to be, right? Yeah. You find yourself in that position and you're like, I don't know how to handle this. And in your mind, all the uninvited people, the logistics person is like, just work harder. Here's all the stuff you should say yes to. And your inner critic is like, you suck. And then the judge is like, they suck too. And I mean,
and the warrior's like, and it's all going to go bad.
We're going to die. Right. And they're all screaming in there. What you need to do in that moment is say, wait, I'm really good at communicating. I'm really good at analyzing situations. I'm really good at thinking creatively. Whatever your strengths are. How can I, and it is this intentional, how can I use my strengths of communication, analytics, and creativity to to help me move forward? What are 5 ways that I can rely on those strengths to move forward now? And that's the invitation. That's intentional.
What I heard from that was, by the way, good coach, please take a seat at the table.
Yeah.
Right. Asking these questions is one of the ways that we get these helpful committee members to show up and start taking part. Remember, they're not, unless you are very well practiced and this has become your new mental habit, these voices are not going to show up without that invitation. That question right there, how can I use my strengths? Mm-hmm. That invites the coach. You might even just say, and this is one that I teach even to kids. So if a kid can do it, so can you, is what would a good coach say? Am I being a good coach for myself? And that it's something to just kind of cue you to get you to open the door and say, please come have a seat at the table. I need you to weigh in on how I move forward.
Yep. I love that one. So the coach is that voice that knows your strengths well, knows how to put you in a position that plays to them. Because in most situations, you could think of a number of actions that you could take that could play to things that are not your strength. Maybe you're not really good at like arguing or making some kind of logical point, but you're really good at, more collaborative communication. Well, then we're going to approach it from a collaborative communication standpoint, not from a more like argumentative standpoint. I mean, there's a million ways you can move forward in any situation, but a good coach will put you in a situation that plays to your strengths. So that's what we're encouraging you to do.
Right. And encourage you to show up, be best, try hard. You've got this.
Yes.
It's a different thing. You've got this.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the wise advisor, which I think is kind of the perfect teammate for the good coach. The wise advisor is the one who knows you and knows what's important and points you in that direction. So we think of the wise advisor as the voice of your values. And that is, and let's say at wherever it is you're standing or sitting right now, you decide to have to take a step. Okay, but what direction are you going to go? Mm-hmm. Right? So you have to know where it is you're going or what your goal is, where you're moving toward to know how to take that step. And your values become the direction. And when you fall back on your values in any situation, they will kind of shine a light on the path that you need to take. And the wise advisor is the one that says, this is hard, but what's important to you is honesty. So be honest, or whatever it is. So in this case, we've got communication, we've got collaborative and honesty, kind of coach and advisor teaming up.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think about I love that you used the analogy of you have to take a step and you could go in any direction, because I always think about these. We've talked about it as a compass, right? There's 360 degrees in a compass, and your value system is your due north. Like if you need to point in a direction, it sort of weeds out the directions that are going against what you truly feel is important. Mm-hmm. And something that I want to highlight here that I've been reading more and more about, it's been coming up in a lot of the literature that I've read, and you can see why it is so critically important. We're going to have to do a whole episode on this, PS, but the importance of cultivating self-trust. And if you have a set of a values system, if you know what your core values are, and you act out of alignment with them, what you're telling yourself is, you are not important to me. I see what you're asking me to do. I see what's important to you, but that's not important to me. I'm going to act against what you're asking of me. I love that you think that's important, but that's not what we're doing right now. And imagine so many times we say in the compassion work that we do, et cetera, we talk about how cultivating that relationship with yourself, if you think about whether you would say that to a little kid or would you say that to your best friend, Ashley, you know what? I love that you say that it's important that I speak to you in a certain way, but that's not how I'm going to do it. I don't care about that. Talk about a way to tear that relationship down. So this wise advisor and being sort of the voice of your values and your due north and that compass, not only does it help you figure out what direction to go, but man, do you begin to trust yourself because you're sticking up for what's important.
Absolutely. And we should do a whole episode on that self-trust thing. That's really interesting. But I think, along with this, when we don't live in alignment with our values, so when we are behaving in a way that is not congruent with what's truly important to us, you're going to end up with inside ick. You're going to end up with some level of discord. It's going to be distress, anxiety, guilt, shame, fear, anger, sadness, a whole host of things. And that's not to say that when you're living your values, none of that stuff will show up, because it's not true. It's hard to live your values sometimes, right? Like you and I assume we both value education. That's why we went to graduate school. I did not love every minute of writing my dissertation. That was pretty painful. And yet I feel good about that. I feel good about that. I have zero regrets because I was following my wise advisor. So when my committee members show up of like, oh, dude, this sucks. You should just Netflix. Well, this was pre-Netflix, but you should go watch TV or whatever. So those unhelpful committee members will show up and take you off course.
Yeah, they're
either going to be the doubters or the haters or the excuse makers, but they take you away from that. And while it might be easier in the moment, that wise advisor has your interests at heart and is pointing you and saying, this is where you need to be. This is where you need to go, because this is what's really important to you at your core.
Yeah. So if we just pause for a second and think about those two, the wise advisor and the coach, think about, well, actually, let me just wrap that one up too, in the same way that we did with the coach. We talked about with the coach, get to know what your strengths are and then intentionally think through. Same situation. The invitation is very similar here. If you don't know what your personal values are, sitting down and spending some time to think about what are those top 3 to 5 things that above everything else is more important to you than anything else, that is going to set you up with that North Star for your compass.
Right.
You don't know which direction to point if you don't have that as a stake in the sand.
Absolutely. And you're going to get pulled in any direction, right? Either from our committee members or from other people and their committee members. But there are a lot of ways to clarify your values. And one way that I like to do it, if you haven't, is just to sit down and think about, it's your 80th birthday. 3 important people in your life at any point are showing up and they're giving you a toast. What do they say? That'll help you figure out what's important to you, because I doubt that your toasts are, wow, Ashley worked a lot of hours, right? But maybe it's
right.
She was compassionate or funny or whatever it was. Those toasts, and if you can also take it as write your own eulogy. It's the same thing, right? What do you want people to say about you and about the way you lived your life and showed up for it? That's a clue to your values.
Absolutely. So if you think about those two, this is where I was going to go before. If you think about the coach and the wise advisor together, inviting them to the table, if you have a clear idea of what your strengths are and a clear idea what your values are, think about, once they're invited, how much louder their voices will be than the rest of those unhelpful committee members, because those unhelpful committee members, they are not you. Right. They're a baseless voice. There's not any substance that's guiding them. They are just spouting off stuff that they've heard. Hey, I heard people sometimes fail when they do this, so you're probably going to too. They have no evidence or no real heart or credibility to what they're saying. They're just sort of noisy. And there's a lot of them. And that's why they tend to be very loud, because we don't take these moments to step back and say, wait, what are my strengths? What are my values? Okay, you guys, you talk now. And they can talk over those other voices and be more clearly heard, because there is substance to what they're saying. There's evidence behind it. There's meat. There are values and strengths that are real things that are actually core to you. unlike those other voices who are not you. You didn't make them. They're just happening.
Think of it like this, like you're a bus driver and you're driving the bus and you're going down the path of life and you've got a lot of unruly passengers and they're shouting at you, stop, pull over, turn around, you went the wrong way, moron. Okay, if you listen to every single one of them, how far are you going to get? And if you know you're taking this bus from here to Chicago, because Chicago is where you want to go, that's your destination, are you going to get there? No. So maybe you've got your two people. You've got your one that's giving you the directions. You need to turn left in 0.2 miles, right? Like your GPS, that's the advisor. And then you've got your coach who's like, it's okay. I know driving a bus is really, really stressful. You're okay. Yep, you've got it. You can switch lanes now. You just have to tune out all of the rest of those unruly members. But when you know who to listen to and you focus your attention on them and you say, please come sit near me, direct me, advise me, then you're going to get where you want to go.
Absolutely. And there's one last one, and we've touched on this in prior episodes, but it is worth talking about again. Think back to times when you've been at your best, so effective. You've shown up in a way that you were like, man, for whatever reason, I was just on it in that situation. We talked about this in the self-care pyramid episode. Each one of us has a core of who we are when we are at our best. Level 2 self-care supports that person who is at their best. That is you as the asset. And that's the last committee member that we want to focus on today. You at your best, how do you operate? How do you feel? How do you show up? How do you experience life? Even if you aren't feeling that way in that moment, we have this incredible ability in our minds to put ourselves in a different context and a different situation than we're in physically or mentally in that moment. We can think about, when I'm at my best, how do I approach problems like this? When I'm at my best, how do I feel in situations like this? When I'm at my best, what are the things that I'm thinking about and what are my behaviors? What do they tend to be? So again, inviting that asset to the table and doing some of that pre-work to make that invitation possible about, what do you look like when you're at your best? What were those situations? What was the context? Who was there? What were you doing? What were you thinking? What did you do before to put yourself in that position? Self-care supports that asset, but really having a clear view of what you look like when you're at your best helps invite that last, third, really helpful committee member to the table to drown out some of those other unhelpful voices.
I really think of the asset as like, well, if I stick with the bus, that's the bus driver. That's the person in charge of it all. And if we think about this from a psych strength perspective, the asset is really, it's you at your core. April, just like you were saying, it's you at your core. Being able, I would say it's mindfulness, right? Like being mindfully aware of what's going on inside, because it's so easy for our mind and all of those committee members to hook us. And then we feel like we are one and the same, but we're not. There's a part of us that can step back and observe. There's a part of us, some people will talk about intuition or knowing it in your gut or your heart. Those are all just the same. They're ways of saying the same thing, which is the you at your best, the true you. And that's the asset. And it's so easy to drown that out or suppress it or disregard it when we're listening to everybody else, inside and outside, and all of those committee members.
I want to draw this back to the most fundamental thing we talk about on this podcast, psych strength, right? So many times, like we talk about psychological strength as how, your mind can be your most valuable asset or your biggest barrier. This is it. This right here, right? Your unhelpful committee members that show up uninvited, if left to its own devices, this is what your mind will do. It will be a big barrier for you. You're going to have loud, unhelpful voices in your ear saying, you're going to fail. Say yes to that thing you know you don't want to do. Here's how you can fit it in. You stop taking care of yourself and devote the time there. Yes, you can. Oh, let's worry about this. Let's time travel and try to predict the future and judge other people. They will be chattering in your ear, causing unnecessary suffering and being one of the biggest barriers that you have to making progress and achieving the life experience that you want to have. And you get to pick this more positive, helpful, stronger side of things. The psychologically strong thing to do is to pause and intentionally call these helpful committee members to the table. And that's what we mean by psych strength. This isn't something that happens naturally. People don't naturally become bodybuilders or professional basketball players or any other sort of physical strength related thing. It requires practice. It requires shooting free throw after free throw, or practicing that skateboarding skill over and over, or whatever sport it is. This requires you recognizing, wow, I'm getting really caught up in my own, unhelpful committee members right now. Hang on, what am I good at and what do I care about? And what do I look like when I'm at my best? How do I get those people to the table? And the more you do it, the stronger you're going to get. So you get to pick. Do you want it to be a valuable asset, or do you want it to be a barrier?
Yep. That is, yes. I just want to say, like, preach, but
I know it is the core, right? It is the core of what we talk about.
It really is. But it makes me think about, I use this example all of the time because we have a dominant hand. Most people have a dominant hand, genetically speaking, right? Like, I am so right-handed that my right forearm is noticeably bigger than my left. But here's the deal. Just so when it comes to doing a task, I'm by default going to grab a pencil with my right hand, a fork with my right hand. I'm going to do things with my right hand. I don't have to. That's just the easy default. Imagine that for whatever reason, I decide like being left-handed would make my life better, improve my experience. What am I going to have to do? Catch every time I've got something in my right hand, make the choice to switch it and put it in my left. And it's going to feel weird and unnatural. That doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just weird and unnatural.
You're just not used to it.
I'm not used to it, right? But with time, with repetition, with practice, I'm going to build that muscle, that coordination. It's going to get faster and easier. It's the same thing when we're talking about mental habits.
Yeah. I mean, think about like, this is the nuance in the word authentic that I want to tease apart, because ignore everything we've just said for just a moment and think about the life change or the life experience you want to have. Pick a life domain. I don't care what it is. Maybe it's work, maybe it's relationships, maybe it's your finances, maybe I don't care, whatever it is. Okay. I'm just going to pick on work right now. You hate your job. You don't want to be in this job anymore. You'd rather be in a different field. You'd rather be doing something different. I don't know, maybe in a different role at work, different types of projects, whatever that happens to be. You would be happier and more fulfilled if you were doing something different. The unhelpful committee members are going to sit there and they're going to chatter in your ear about how you shouldn't be doing this. This isn't something you've done before. This is a change. You're quitting something. Look at all the time and effort you've put into it. I can't believe you're going to throw that all away. If you've ever watched Everybody Loves Raymond, the dad, like the grandpa on there, whenever he would talk about his wife, he'd be like, bep, 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 bep. That's literally what I'm like, bep, 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 bep. They're just going to go. But those more helpful committee members, they may not feel, as you mentioned, as familiar because you're not used to bringing them to the table. That does not mean that they are inauthentic. Rather, I'm going to draw on an Ashleyism right now. Don't think about the word in those situations where you're like, I don't know, is this authentically me or not? It feels really, unfamiliar and whatever. Does that mean it's inauthentic? I don't care. Is that voice helping you get to the change that you want to make or not? Is it helpful or not? Don't worry about authentic because it's all going to feel weird and sort of clunky at first. You're going to feel like you're cheering yourself on and it's sort of void of any real substance. That just means it's unfamiliar and you need more practice. Is it helpful? Is telling you suck and everything's going to be terrible, that's not helpful in making the career change you want to make. You can do this. You've already built a big career. You have so many skills that you're going to take with you that are going to translate. Yes, you can. You value having that flexibility and you would have that in that other job, like on and on and on. Call those to the table and ask yourself if they're helpful, not necessarily familiar. We'll use that word instead of authentic.
I like that. I like that. Or true, right? Which one is true or accurate? It's the same thing. It's the same point. It doesn't matter. It's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that. I like that illustration. And then I also think kind of coming at it from a different angle. Let's say it's not about making a change. Let's say you're going to make dinner for your family.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're making dinner for your family, you've got that committee, the martyr kicking up, right? Like, oh my gosh, I'm the only one and I have to do this every night. If I weren't here, my family would starve. Okay, what's the outcome there? How do you
Feel resentful?
Right? Or let's say you call to mind and you're like, all right, I got to make dinner. All right, advisor, let's do this. And your advisor says, you get to make dinner for your family because nourishing them and caring for them is important to you. This is one way that you show you're caring for your family. Now, you're making dinner either way, but depending on which committee member I invite to this table, it's going to have a big difference on how I experience that evening. And that's up to you. And that's up to me. We get that choice. We get that choice. You can put the pen in your left hand.
Yeah. So 3 committee members, the coach, the wise advisor, the asset, that balance out the noise that you get from those unhelpful committee members. We go a lot deeper on this topic in our core signature program, Ascend. We have like skimmed the top millimeter of icing on this cake. There is amazing stuff under the surface. There are incredible exercises where you practice this and you get really good at exactly figuring out how to invite yours to the table. We do a ton of exercises to help craft those invitations in that program. So I would highly suggest, if you're interested in this, head over to peakmindpsychology.com/ascend. You can get more information about that program. We've got that in this episode description as well. And then Ashley, we've got a free resource that we literally just released. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. And this is, we did it because we're hearing from so many people. This is a really hard time with pandemic, meets back to school, meets impending election season. So we created 3 quick psych strength exercises. They take 3 to 6 minutes total. The technical behind the scenes, it's mindfulness, self-compassion, and cognitive work. What it really is, it's going to help you slow down, check in, be mindful, and invite these more helpful committee members to the table. You can get access to this. It's peakmindpsychology.com/support, or just through our homepage right now. So peakmindpsychology.com/support. Get these 3 free, quick exercises to help you quiet those unhelpful committee members.
Yeah. And that last one that Ashley mentioned, literally, you're going to hit the submit button and you're going to get them. So in the moment, if you are feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling like I am tearing myself down, I feel like my perfectionism, my inner critic is taking over, this is out of control, hit that button. You're going to get access to them in that moment, hit play. And I promise you in 5 minutes, you're going to feel different than you did when you began. I actually did one of our exercises the other day. I was super overwhelmed. I had one of those days. I'm not joking. It was just more than I wanted to deal with that day. And I literally sat down at the end of the day and I'm like, you know, when you put something out into the world and you wonder, does this even work? I'm freaking out. And your inner critic starts to question and like they're squawking in their ears, probably not that good and whatever. So then I, as a guinea pig, went back to our site and I'm like, I'm just going to take this self-compassion break really quick. I felt so much better. I was almost crying by the end of it. I'm like, this is so much better. So high five to us. We actually did a good job. My inner critic took over, but our exercises saved me. So huge plug to that. If you guys need a little bit of support in the moment, hit play. We've got you. We're there for you. Amazing. All right. This was part 2 of the two-part series on the committee in your mind. Again, if you did not catch part 1, please go back and listen to that. This is going to make a heck of a lot more sense if you've listened to that episode. And if you know of someone who has a loud inner critic, we all have that friend who's insanely good. They are so capable. They could kill it and are just killing it. And they just have a loud critic or a loud worrier or a loud Debbie Downer or whatever it is. please share this series with them, because we want people to understand you can disobey those unhelpful committee members and you can intentionally call to the table ones that are more helpful. Everyone would be a lot more effective if we knew how to do that and built that muscle.
Right.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much for tuning in this week. We so appreciate it. Check out those resources that are in the show notes, are on the show notes page for this episode and in the description. And we will see you next week for another episode. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Tell me if this sounds like you. I'll finally be happy. I'll finally take a breath. I'll finally find some balance when I get through this crazy season of life. We hear that from so many people, and the fact is, many times, life is just a crazy season. All of it. Between your career, your family, your community obligations, attempting to have a social life, and trying to fit in self-care, whatever that is, we end up feeling stretched so thin. Now, I want to challenge you to think about things differently. Rather than focusing on external circumstances and their impact on your happiness, your sense of ease and balance, and your mental well-being, what if, instead, you focused on something you can actually control? What if you built the psychological strength that would allow you to thrive through life when things are going well and even when they're not? What if you could feel less scattered, more in control, less anxious, more peaceful and joyful? We want that for you too. That's why we are so beyond excited to announce the beta release of our signature Psych Strength Building program, Ascend. This program combines evidence-based tools, techniques, and information from the fields of psychology and life design to focus on 3 important modules: you, your mind, and your life. Learn your unique combination of strengths, values, and identity, and the ways in which they interact and lead you to approach life in your unique way. Dig into your mind to understand the conscious and subconscious processes that act as a lens through which you experience life. And finally, harness the power of life design to begin to steer your life into alignment with who you uniquely are. Enrollment in this beta round of Ascend is open now, and because it's our beta round, the price is astonishingly low. So if you have ever had even a suspicion that you could benefit from building psychological strength through a guided, science-backed experience, now is the time. Visit www.peakmindpsychology.com/ascend for more information and to join us. Friends, it is time to build psychological strength. It's time to live by design and not by default. It is time to live like your life depends on it, because it does. Join us in Ascend by visiting www.peakmindpsychology.com/ascend. That's www.peakmindpsychology.com/ascend. It's a simple fact that nearly everyone in the world could benefit from building psychological strength, but not everyone will put in the time and effort to do so. But today you did. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Building Psychological Strength. Now, if you're interested in building the mental toughness, confidence, and resilience you need to thrive through life's ups and downs, visit us at www.peakmindpsychology.com. Also, if there's someone in your life who could benefit from this episode, please share it with them. And if you yourself found this episode valuable, meaning if you took away even one insight that you can use to build psychological strength in your own life, we would so appreciate it if you would drop us a rating and a review on iTunes. The thing is, the more ratings and reviews we have, the easier it is to get this powerful and important content out to the people who need to hear it. Remember, your mind can be your most valuable asset or your biggest liability, and you get to choose. So choose wisely, my friend. And I'll see you next time on Building Psychological Strength.